We're going to be picking up here in the 15th book of Yisrayl. The 15th book of Yisrayl, which is the righteousness prevails, is the heading of that book of Yisrayl. And we're going to be picking up on chapter 7 this evening. This is found on page 72 of your 15th book of Yisrayl. Chapter 7. And the title of this sermon that Pastor gave on April 5th, 2015 was "The House of Yahweh is racing to bring forth righteousness to destroy the works of the evil of the gods." The house of Yahweh is racing to bring forth righteousness to destroy the works of the evil of the gods. And Pastor starts off this sermon saying, "Shalom everyone, man, what a beautiful crowd, joyful cheering and praise to Yahweh. This is beautiful, praise Yahweh. Look at this Yahweh. Look at it, praise Yahweh. You may be seated." If you notice, that guy on the news said the next step is war. You can't get this thing worked out. It keeps getting worse. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You know, and all the news today that we see coming out here from the world, their minds are on war, their words are on war, and that's their next option, their only option that they're showing for a solution to the problems that they're having. In verse 3 here on page 73 of the 15th book of Yisrayl, Pastor says, "As you can see, the world is really getting screwed up, and they're going deeper every day into sin and suffering and death. And we're here to stop that. You and I." That's right. Praise Yahweh. You know, and if you look at the news, you know, I'm sure Yahweh willing, maybe we'll see some more news tomorrow, but if you just think about the news that we watched last Sabbath, you know, we see the great distress that the earth is in, and how world leaders, their minds are so confused and so screwed up, as Pastor says right here, about how the world is really getting screwed up and they're going deeper every day into sin. I mean, you can see their minds don't even really have any compassion or consideration for those who live on the face of the earth, where their options are nuclear. You know, that's their options. That's how they're going to solve their problems, is they're going to bring nuclear war. The first ones with this nuclear strike to show that they're the ones that need to be reasoned with, or they're the ones who need to be in control. And remember this, you know, in our day-to-day lives, that the world is really messed up and going deeper every day into sin, suffering, and death. And we're here to stop that. You and I, Pastor said. You know, and if you remember, if you write down for your notes, Romans chapter 8. If you write down for your notes, Romans chapter 8 and verse 19, the Apostle Shaul wrote, "For the earnest expectation of the creation waits for the revealing of the sons of Yahweh." And in verse 21, he said, "Because the creation itself will also be delivered from the bondage of corruption into this glorious liberty by the children of Yahweh." And remember all the things we learned this feast. Pastor brought out about the sons of Yahweh, the original sons of Yahweh, and how we have an opportunity to qualify for the positions that they actually missed out on because they turned from that obedience that Yahweh had set before them. In verse 29, Romans 8:29, it says, For whom he did foreknow, he also did foreordain to be changed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. You know, we know Yeshua has qualified for this position. Our great high priest, Yeshua Messiah, he's qualified for this position, and he is doing his work and leading and guiding Yahweh's house here through Yisrael Hawkins. You know, we have the opportunity to actually be the ones who will end this everyday suffering, death, and sin that we see taking place in the world on a continual basis. And it's not getting any better, and the mankind's answers are worse sometimes than the problems. You know, as I think Pastor said before, you know, they have a Band-Aid fix for the problems. They want to put a Band-Aid on it. But, you know, the solutions and the answers that they come up with are actually worse than the problems. Now, in verse 14 here on page 74, verse 14 of your 15th book of Yisrayl, Pastor says, "So the Pope is having a little trouble right now because we're opposing the Pope." And before the house of Yahweh was established, before Yahweh set up this house in these last days, the Catholic Church had free reign to deceive the minds of men, into total ignorance, and they had no problems doing so. But now, because of the job that's being done by this house, and Pastor says, well, that's our job, which is to oppose the Pope. The race is set before us. It's also set before him, and we're the last part of the plan of Yahweh. If you can get this in your mind, there are two races being run here. They're not allowed to kill this house of Yahweh. The gates of hell will not prevail, Yeshua said. And that's in Matthew 10:28, I believe, or Matthew 16:18, where it says, the gates of hell will not prevail against the house of Yahweh. But the Pope is having a little trouble right now because we're opposing him. Well, that's our job. And in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1, it reads, therefore, since we are also surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, and just in this last sermon that we went over last week, chapter 6 of the 15th book of Yisrayl, Pastor showed that witnesses there, is Deuteronomy 30, 15 through 19. The choices we make, whether we're making righteous choices and qualifying for life, or whether we're making wrong choices, and condemning ourselves to death. And this is the great cloud of witnesses. We actually witness against ourselves through the choices that we make. But therefore, since we are also surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight. Remember that word was encumbrance or burden. And the sin which so easily entraps us. And let us run the race that is set before us with endurance. We have to lay aside any kind of burdens or anything that deviates and gets us off focus on the race that we're running. Because remember what we read here in verse 14 of the 15th book of Yisrayl, that our job, is to oppose this system, to oppose this son of perdition, this one who exalts himself, makes himself into the image of a God, the one who is actually bringing the misery, the suffering that we see in the world today, which is, and we know that the Pope, he's just a showman, he's just the spokesman of the Vatican or the Catholic Church, but we know that he is the one who is fulfilling the job that they have given him. And our job as the house of Yahweh, remember what Pastor said on the feast, it's his job, but it's our job because we're his sons. Our job is to oppose this same system. We have to do, as it said here in Hebrews 12 verse 1, that let us lay aside every weight, every burden, and the sin which so easily entraps us. Because if we're not constantly 100% on guard against sin, men, and do as Pastor said many years ago, to stop it, nip it in the bud. Get sin out of our lives. The thoughts of sin, or the things that would lead to sin. Get these things out of our minds, out of our lives, and any kind of burdens or any kind of things that we find ourselves leading us into the path of deception. Get those things out of our lives and out of our minds. Learn to run this race with endurance, as it said here in Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1, to run it with endurance, that we be at the finish line, because that's the goal, is to do as Daniel said, he who endures unto the end. And you can't, when you're running a race, you can't just sit in place. You have to push forward. You have to, stay on that straight and narrow, pushing forward. In verse 16 here of the 15th book of Yisrayl, which is on page 75, and Daniel shows us exactly when Babylon would start being opposed in the last days. Because Yahweh limits the time. He limits the race here of the fourth kingdom that would take over all the world. So these things have a limit to them. Despite the confused teaching of Christianity, time will not just continue to go on and on and on, and you have wars and peace and wars. And first of all, they've never even had peace, for any length of time, but they just go from one war to the next war to the next war. But these things are limited, as Daniel showed in the book of Daniel, the great prophet Daniel showed, Yahweh limits this time. He limits the race here of the fourth kingdom that would take over all the world. Remember, this fourth kingdom is this Roman Empire, which still rules the earth today. Although they pretend and make out like they have no power of their own, they have no army of their own, we can see that this religion controls the armies of the earth and fulfills the deeds and the desires of that system. They get the armies to fulfill their deeds and their desires and to make the moves that they want made so they can have this world dominance. Every Bible scholar knows about the fourth kingdom of Daniel chapter 7. I haven't seen a scholar yet, Pastor writes, that wrote anything in a commentary or anywhere that made any sense at all that didn't agree that the fourth kingdom of Daniel 7 is the Roman Catholic Church. The Holy Roman Catholic Church, who claims the keys of this blood, or who claims the keys of the blood. See, we don't claim the keys of the blood. We claim the keys of righteousness. That's what makes the difference. Praise Yahweh, Pastor said. Because that's our claim isn't to blood. Remember, we're going to get rid of this defiled blood, that has been so defiled throughout the generations that we see here. We're going to be governed by Spirit Holy. Okay, Yahweh's Spirit Holy is going to flow through us and govern us. We're going to get rid of this defiled blood, and the house of Yahweh doesn't bring bloodshed, doesn't practice bloodshed. Never throughout all the 7 works of Yahweh has the house of Yahweh ever brought bloodshed. Remember what Pastor wrote about that, about how in the King James Version will make it look as if Moshe or Abraham shed blood, but this wasn't so. These were worldly kings and God worshippers who brought this bloodshed, and Yahweh just warned and foretold what would take place, just as we see in these last days. And the Catholic Church actually makes this claim. Remember, Malachi Martin wrote in the Keys of this Blood, that the Catholic Church, they lay claim to being, the descendants of the Aaronic priesthood. Okay, and they claim these keys of this blood. But we, the house of Yahweh, we claim the keys of righteousness. Okay, now remember, Daniel shows us exactly when Babylon would start being opposed in the last days, because Yahweh limits the time. We see time now is at the very end, where there's just minutes and seconds left. There's not years and decades. The time is very short. Okay, for us to get behind the opposition of Babylon, this Babylonian system, and to put sin out of our minds and put the desires of the world out of our minds so that we can have part in this great eternal kingdom that's going to bring peace to the universe. In verse 23, here on page 76, Pastor writes, "These prophecies have never been explained before, not even by the prophets and not by the apostles." Now get this here. He's talking about the prophecies that were written in times of old. These prophecies have never been explained before, not even by the prophets and not by the apostles. They were inspired to write bits and pieces of these prophecies, but no one ever put it together, and no one opened the seals to put it together. Now remember, the prophets, they saw many things in the book of Daniel, chapter 12. Remember, they saw many things, but they were never able to put all these things together, because Yahweh reserved this for his last day's work. He reserved this for the 7th Malach to bring forth these things under direction of Yeshua, high priest over the house of Yahweh, who has the power and authority to open these seals, and he has opened it to this last day's work. But in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4, Yahweh said, "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the time of the end. Many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased." And Daniel 12 verse 9, because in verse 8, remember, Daniel said, "So I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my ruler, what will be the end of these things?" But he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified and made white and tried and tested, but the wicked will do wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand." And then even in verse 13, Daniel was told again, But you go your way until the end, for you will rest and stand in your lot at the end of days. Of course, the great prophet Daniel will be resurrected. He will be resurrected and be able to see how these things were unfolded. But remember, the seals were shut up and sealed until the time of this end. When Yeshua opened these seals, our high priest Yeshua opened these seals through inspiration to the seventh Malach, Yisrayl Hawkins. Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins, our great teacher and leader in these last days, who is revealing these secrets. And Pastor says here in verse 23, they were inspired to write bits and pieces of these prophecies, but no one ever put it together, and no one opened the seals to put it together until the last day's work. The seventh work of Yahweh, Revelations 10 verse 7. And I believe it is, shows in this time period, you and I, the house of Yahweh. Remember in Revelations 10 verse 7, it talks about the seventh Malach, how he comes down from heaven. Remember, Pastor said it's not that he came from, the heavens, not that he came from outer space. No, it's the inspiration that's come down from heaven, from the high priest Yeshua Messiah, that's come to Yisrayl Hawkins in these last days. You and I, the house of Yahweh in this generation, will be revealing these secrets of Yahweh that have been held secret all these years. The people couldn't understand them. And this is what is the job here in these last days of the seventh Malach, is to actually bring forth the understanding of these prophecies. Okay, because these prophecies have never been explained before, not even by the prophets or the apostles. Remember, they were inspired to write bits and pieces, but no one put it together. Okay, this was reserved for the seventh Malach, this last day's work, the Western Light. In verse 24 on page 76 of the 15th book of Yisrael, Pastor says, this race that you saw, I brought on purpose in Yeshua's memorial, which was last week's sermon we covered. It would have been chapter 6 in this 15th book of Yisrael, Yeshua's memorial 2015. I brought on purpose in Yeshua's memorial because he's the high priest over this work. This race that we're running to bring forth Yahweh's way, and right now we're gaining ground daily against this beastly system. And you can see that. You can see the people who are seeing this, they're saying, hey, this is truth. Okay, and this is what we see in the last days, that those who are searching for truth, when they come across the teachings of Yisrayl Hawkins, they're saying, hey, this is truth, because they've been searching for these things. Some people have been searching for these things their whole lives, okay, and they've been going through all different churches and religions in all areas of the world, and they're searching for this message that's being poured out by this work in these last days. Remember Matthew 24:14, that this message will be preached to all the world as a witness, and then the end would come, and by the witness. It was brought by this witness, Yisrayl Hawkins. On page 77, on page 77 in verse 29, Pastor says, but these people that are rising up and speaking out now, they're getting braver all the time, and groups are being formed. We see this taking place, and we see what they're bringing forth is what we've taught them. Because there are a large group of people who are actually breaking away from these teachings of the Catholic Church, and who are actually coming against this system. And you'll even see it a lot in the news when you're watching or reading the news. You hear them talking about this system that is, and they don't really see that sin governs this system, but they say this system that is consuming mankind. The system that has their clutches on everyone, where no one can have the ability to prosper or succeed or have peace and joy, because the system binds everyone down. We know that it's a system of sin which is brought forth by the Catholic Church. And we, the house of Yahweh, are bringing forth this system of righteousness, practicing righteousness. We see this taking place, Pastor says here in verse 29, and we see what they're bringing forth is what we've taught them. So we know that we're the ones who opened the door and brought the news to them, that we're right and the Catholic Church is wrong. We know everything. And Pastor said that in response. Remember, there was that news article that came out, I believe it was several weeks before this sermon, where the Pope had said, some some people claim to know everything. And Pastor said, well, that's right. We at the House of Yahweh, we claim to know everything because we do. Okay, because Yahweh's given this inspiration to this last day's work. So Yisrayl Hawkins does know everything. Okay, he understands these prophecies. He knows what's coming to pass with the world and where their governments are going to end up. And he knows how this thing pans out and how Yahweh's kingdom is soon to take over the rulership of the world to be able to start bringing the earth back to its original beauty and glory, and to be able to get it ready for everyone who's ever lived to be resurrected, to be able to have an opportunity to be taught righteousness. The Catholic Church knows nothing. We know the secrets of Yahweh and are able to teach them to others. And it's the two prophetic words Pastor put out about global warming. He uncovered the great secret of what's causing global warming. And it was probably 2.5 years after he brought out the last prophetic word, because one he brought out in 2007, I think the other one was 2011 or 2012, and 2 to 2.5 years after that is when the Pope came out with this encyclical on global warming, and they still have it to the same thing that's been preached from decades ago by these scientists, that it's the burning of fossil fuels, burning of coal and wood. It's our cars that are causing this global warming, but they really don't understand how the earth works. And Yahweh has allowed Pastor to understand how the earth works, to actually be able to show to them how there's a firmament that surrounds the earth that governs life. And they've destroyed this. They've destroyed it through their sins, and mainly their sexual sins have brought this destruction upon this firmament to where it's now not able to do its job correctly. And we see the great devastation that's coming upon the earth in the form of natural disasters and unpredictable weather patterns. But this is part of when Pastor says we know everything. The Catholic Church is preaching the same lies that have been preached, and they're only going to use. They don't want to fix global warming or try to correct the problems the earth are in. They're just using that as another excuse to bring in money, so they can bring in money, have these carbon taxes, bring in more money so that they be able to go and conquer more land, more people. And continue to spread this deception. The same old tricks they've been using for thousands of years now. We know the secrets of Yahweh and are able to teach them to others. The schools are agreeing with us. The professors are agreeing, hey, this is really something. This man has really opened a door here. I need you to understand this race before this feast is over, because we are opposing Babylon, and that's the race. Now remember, only the house of Yahweh knows the secrets of Yahweh and is able to teach it to others. And the worldly schools and professors are agreeing with us. And this is what Pastor's bringing out in every teaching that he brings, from the weekly blog post to the monthly prophetic words and newsletters to the weekly sermons. He's showing here the great secrets of Yahweh, and revealing these things to those whom Yahweh is opening the mind to understanding at this time. Now we know that it's not the day of salvation for everyone, so of course there's many who are reading and listening to these things, and they're not ready to come out of their religions yet, or they're not ready to come to Yahweh's house and submit themselves to the keeping of the feasts and the Sabbaths on a regular basis, but they are reading these things and they are watching this house. Pastor says here, and we're prophesied to win that race. Okay, remember the race that we're opposing Babylon. Remember the Catholic Church is running a race. They're bringing forth this blood-filled system. Remember the four horns of the altar of death. This evil wickedness, that's being spread, and with their forked tongue they try to preach that, they're trying to help mankind. Well, if they're trying to help, they should stop trying to help, because all their help only brings forth more misery and suffering. But the house of Yahweh is bringing forth this race of endurance, this righteousness being taught. Righteousness is going to prevail. Remember 1 Yochanan 3 verse 7, he who practices righteousness is righteous. And praise Yahweh, man, we continue to keep our Sabbath appointments and continue to to build on practicing righteousness here at Yahweh's house so that we will be a part of this righteous administration that brings peace to the universe. The world was given an amount of time, Pastor says. They were given an amount of time. And Daniel 7, he shows this beast and he tells you when it will be over. And if you start with that in mind and you know when the house of Yahweh will be established, the prophet said in these last days. Okay, and Yahweh's house has been established in these last days. You know, we're so blessed to be able to sit here in Yahweh's house to learn righteousness being taught and to actually, be adopted into this faith to be able to qualify to be sons of Yahweh. And let's never take these things for granted, man. Let's continue to strive and working together in unity, working in unity with Yahweh's house so that we will be a part of this great ruling administration which is going to bring peace to the earth. What mankind's taken 6,000 years to defile, we're going to clean up in just 1,000 years. It's going to be a short work. In closing, men, in Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 10, Proverbs 18 verse 10, it says, "The name of Yahweh is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe." Continue, men, to run this race of endurance and continue to remain tethered to the choicest branch. May Yahweh bless your Sabbath. If you all please stand. I now have the great privilege and honor to turn the class over to the great Kohan, Michael Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. Okay. So let's take off here in verse 40 here when he says, take a look at Daniel chapter 7 as you've been mentioning earlier. In Daniel 7 verse 18 he says, "But the saints of Yahweh will take the kingdoms." He says that force is not really force, but it means to inherit by law. Okay, that is, it's given to the house of Yahweh by law. First in Genesis 10, and that's the first place given to us by law. And we don't have the power, we wouldn't have the power to take it by force, not even if we were given full authority. There's no possible way that you could take over something through force. With all of the governments and stuff that there is. I mean, you see that taking place when someone bucks up against the federal government. Well, then they have the FBI and every other group come in there with their SWAT teams and the armored vehicles and all this kind of stuff armored down. There's no possible way that someone could actually take over something like that. But remember, Yahweh says it's not by that type of force. It's not by might. It's by His Spirit. And the Spirit is the laws of Yahweh. And it's through teaching that we're going to make them lay down their weapons and put them down, because they're going to be so ashamed of it that they're not going to want to war. They're going to want and desire that peace, because they're already going to see what the result is of the war and the force and so forth that they have. So he says here, but Yahweh doesn't want us to take it in that manner either. Right? Okay, He wants them to be taught. All things will be accomplished in His laws of love and with His laws of love. And that's what we're teaching now, and it's advancing on these laws of hatred and force right now. So, we're actually taking these kingdoms away from Satan. Remember, Satan has the whole world deceived, and we're actually taking these things away from her every time we stand up for the laws and we teach these things, and people respond to them. And that's weakening her power. But they would take it by inheritance, by law. Okay? And you remember it also talked about how the Yeshua was I think it's in Luke where it says that Yeshua was the son of Yosef, reckoned to be the son of Yosef, which means by law, by the authority of the law itself. And of course he was taught the laws of Yahweh and brought forth in the laws of Yahweh. And that's why he was qualified to be the Messiah, because he was brought forth at all of these things. And he was promised this through inheritance. Remember that he would come through the seed of David, and that he would inherit these things, and he would be the promised Messiah. And it's the same thing with us. It's through inheritance that we come forth to Yahweh, into this world, and this is how we will possess the kingdom, because remember, it's going to be our inheritance. Remember, Yeshua said, "O little flock, blessed are you to hear the words, enter into the great kingdom of Yahweh, for it was given to you from the foundation of the earth," right? So before Yahweh ever knew us, he knew we were ever born or anything. He had us in his plan, and all this was inherited. And like it says in Hebrews, these things are reserved in the heavens for us. All of these positions and so forth, that's actually part of our inheritance. So he says, we will possess the kingdoms. He says, notice I told you the word king means kingdoms. It's kingdoms. We will possess these kingdoms forever. Yes, forever and ever. Verse 19, he says, then I will know the truth of the fourth beast. And that was Daniel speaking, he said, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his claws of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue of his feet. He says, well, this, you see these things in films and stuff where people draw all of these pictures of these animals looking like this, and they have no idea what it represents and what it means, but they take everything so literally and stuff, but their minds are completely blank. They don't have any understanding as to what these beasts symbolize and so forth. But notice Yahweh says that we will possess the kingdoms, okay? That's an awesome thing, when you think about what Yahweh has in store for us. But he says they have no love for these people. He says, the apostle said, the days are coming when men will be lovers of themselves and no love for their neighbor. And that's the way it is now. Everybody's concerned about their own selves. They're not concerned about anybody else. They're looking out for number one, for themselves. Yahweh is not number one in their lives. They are. So the love grows cold as iniquity grows stronger and stronger and stronger. And right, they keep pushing the laws further and further away to show, and all this is done, remember, so Yahweh has given it a time period set aside for it to show mankind that this is the result of what takes place when they won't keep his laws. Verse 20, he says, and of the 10 horns, he says, you remember the 10 horns of Revelation also, the 10 horns that were on his head, and of the other horn, which we've proven over and over again, is the kingdom that sits on the 7 hills of Rome. Revelation 17 talks about the same thing, which came up before whom 3 fell. Of course, that was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and Essenes, and they fell. And, of course, they had the roving army, which plucked these up and brought them. Remember, Titus came in, destroyed Rome, and took them all to, destroyed Jerusalem and took them all to Rome, right? And then they set up there and became universal and became the Catholic Church and so forth. So the religion was still there. The religion's always been there. And that's the one thing with the Roman army is when the Roman army went out, they always went out to seek whatever they could find. They were looking for entertainment kind of thing too, and whatever intrigued them by the different nations, they took it back with them to Rome. And remember, that's one of the things that Yahweh said in his law is do not seek how these other nations worship their gods, because it would draw you into it. And so the Romans did the very exact thing that Yahweh said don't do. Okay, so of course the Romans, were the Israelites as well. But that is, they were plucked up and transplanted. The 3 fell. Okay, and the horn that had eyes and a mouth and spoke very great things. So, you see that too. You see pictures of this little horn on the beast and it's got eyes and a big mouth, and stuff. And that's as far as they can comprehend, what this horn is. Well, of course, it was religious power. It was a religious power, if you remember, because of the fact that it tried to change the laws of Yahweh. So no other authority would do such a thing. And then also, you remember the rulers would, and the higher people in high society and so forth, would wear headdresses with horns and stuff, showing their power and their magnificence and their positions in the governments and so forth. But his look was more stout, it said, more mighty and more imposing than his fellows. In other words, he had something in mind and he was going to go after it, and he did accomplish it. In verse 21, I beheld when the same horn made war with the saints. He says, well, this is what we're seeing in the second part of the book of Yahweh. The second part's written for us to show you this purpose. And remember, okay, the scriptures tell you that the whole reason the entire book of Yahweh was written is for these last days. It was written for us because we're the only ones who have the entire book of Yahweh in front of us to be able to study and to be able to understand through our teacher. No one else has ever been able to understand that. No one else has been given that opportunity since the beginning of time. And remember, he made war with the saints, and so he, until the time that he was given. Okay, so they made war with the saints up until a certain time. He's allotted a certain time. Now, as you said before, we couldn't take it by force because we couldn't stand under the pressure against the United States. Not against the United States Army or against the police even of the city. Even if Clyde weren't come out here, the firearms and so forth, you can't withstand that kind of stuff. But they don't have power over us. See, that's the thing, is that Yahweh is the one who is its only source of power. Remember Yeshua, when Yeshua was arrested and he was brought before Pilate. And Pilate was saying this, and he says, don't you know I have the authority to put you to death or to grant you life? And what did he say to him? He says, you have no power except that my Father gives you that power, And in Daniel chapter 2, he also says about, Daniel said that Yahweh is the one who puts people in office and takes them out of office. Yahweh is the one who is in control. And so Yahweh, with his power, he's holding these things back and protecting his house. He has to. Okay? He's already given the promise. He's already promised us that the gates of hell are not going to prevail. So we're protected in that sense. However, if we're stupid enough to go out and to tempt Yahweh, as the scripture says and so forth, go against what he says to do, well, then we're stepping out. It's not like you're tempting Yahweh. Yahweh can't be tempted. But if you tempting Yahweh in that sense, in the way that it's written, which is written wrong, but the fact is that if you go out away from underneath his protection, you separate yourself from that protection, then you're inviting trouble yourself, and you have only yourself to blame. But they couldn't have power over us unless Yahweh allowed it anyway, okay? And he showed us these things in the courts and so forth with all the different ways in which they tried to come against us before. So they have power, okay? The saints have power until a certain time here. They're waging war against them until a certain time. And like it says in verse 48 here, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints. Now remember what judgment is, okay? The judgment of Yahweh doesn't mean like, you do something, bam, they slow down a hammer and, sentence you, The judgment of Yahweh is simply saying, here's my law. Here's what it says to do. If you don't do it, I'm going to warn you that this curse will come upon you. Now you make the choice. And that's the judgment, because the judgment comes with us. We make the choice. Okay, and that's what choosing is. It's a judgment. So remember, it's inherited by law. Okay, this judgment, all the law, statutes, and judgments of the government of Yahweh is going to be inherited by law. And that law is going with us. We have the law on our side because we're the ones who keep the Ten Commandments, right? And we're the ones who have the testimony of Yeshua, our high priest. We're the ones that the book of Yahweh is spoken about. These things, and they were written thousands of years ago, but it pertains to us in these last days, just as Daniel wrote about these things in the last days. Now, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of Yahweh. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdoms. They possess them. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to see this in our generation. In this generation here, we're going to see the possession of all the kingdoms on the face of this earth. Okay? And it's not going to be long. So, the fourth beast, of course, he's the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth. Okay, he will devour the whole earth. That word devour is number 399, and it means to accuse. So you think about the fact that, they do accuse us, and Satan's kingdom accuses the kingdom of Yahweh of doing things. It means to devour or to eat, but it's also from number 398, which means to eat up, and also to burn up. Okay, to burn up, to consume, and to devour. Well, that it's this kingdom here that is responsible and will be responsible for the wars, the nuclear wars, which will burn the earth up. And so it was different from all other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth. The whole earth is going to be consumed in these nuclear wars. And down to verse 52, he says, and it will tread it down and break it into pieces. Okay, so it's going to tread down the earth, it's going to tear it down, it's going to trample what's under. Tread it down means to trample on the feet. Okay, and just like, what they fail to realize is that Yahweh is in control, and at the very end it says that the people will be ashes under the soles of the feet of Yahweh's saints, right? That's the true treading that's going to be done as you walk over them and so forth. But this trampling down, this treading down here, is the fact that they use authority. They use this force to tear down everything, okay? And Satan has given them this inspiration and leads and guides them and teaches them to do these things. And this is the reason why the earth is like it says in Isaiah 24, the whole earth is defiled. Okay? Well, Satan has the whole world deceived already, so she didn't have to do anything for that. She's got it done, and she just keeps it up. She just keeps maintaining it, But the thing is that once it's got into the minds of men to where this confusion, this Babylonian confusion starts up in them, as it did way back in the time of Babylon, in Cush's day and so forth, all it did was continue to increase and increase and increase to where, she just has to kind of like maintain it. But it's gotten to a point to where the whole world, where the earth itself almost can't even sustain itself, or sustain mankind because of that fact. Do you realize, brethren, that we're in the sabbatical year? We're in the 7th year. We're letting those land rest. We're letting the microbes rest. That's the only thing that's going to keep us alive, okay? It's because we're not like the rest of the world. We're proving to them, beyond a shadow of a doubt, as much as we possibly can, that we believe in Yahweh's plan. And we want to see them come out of this. Because remember, they're suffering, okay? The microbes are suffering. And so, we're doing our best to try and show them that we do desire for them to have peace as well. Because this is what we're going to do. We're going to get, when peace comes, peace is not just for us. It's not just for humans to say you got peace. Peace is for all creation, okay? Because you can't live without all creation. Remember, you're the last thing that was created. In the 6 days before everything before man was created, everything else on earth was created to support mankind. Mankind was made last. Otherwise, he'd have died off if he was made in the first or second, third day. He'd have had no way to survive. He needed everything else. And so for us to maintain life, we need everything. And that's why Yahweh says that he is the creator of all things and teaches us. And that's why it says in Romans that the whole creation is groaning right now because of the fact that, that they're suffering because of the sins of mankind. And we contributed to that too. Don't forget about that. We contributed to that in our past. And so we're trying to show them now that we're sorry and we have repented. So he's breaking them in pieces, okay? Remember, that's the old divide and conquer tactic. It's not unity, but separation, right? Separation. And you keep that confusion going. And so it would tread it down and break into pieces, and that's their job. That's the Pope's job. He's going the way of the evil of the gods. And he makes war like Cain was prophesied to do. Remember, we have continual war on this earth. It's the same thing. It's never ended. It's never stopped. It's still the same thing that's still going on because of the way that it was all laid down, and Yahweh prophesied it, and he just sat back and let it take its course so that it could all come to completion. And it has to. We have to see the suffering. We have to suffer in this life, because Yahweh could heal. And of course, there has been instantaneous healings and stuff in Yahweh's house and stuff. But remember what the scripture says too. It says it's beneficial for us that we suffer, that we are afflicted, okay? Because we need that reminder. We need that reminder of what sin brings and what is suffered in our life. Now, we have the blessing of the fact that if it wasn't for Yahweh, each and every one of us would be no different than the people out in the world, because everybody has diseases lingering in their bodies right now. You have microscopic beings in you that could kill you instantly overnight. But the practice of keeping Yahweh's laws would keep these things at bay. And Yahweh allows you to live. Verse 24, and he says, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom were 10 kings that would arise, and another will arise after them. And he will be different from the first ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. Now that word subdue, it means, to make it, to put lower. He gave them like a lower status. He went over them, joined in them, got them into his side so that he could have more authority and power. But you remember the Herodians were the ones who were the more powerful one, and each one of those groups, the Essenes, they're known about, they talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls and all this garbage and stuff, but they were a religious type of people, but they weren't Yahweh. They weren't the House of Yahweh, And then of course you had the Sadducees who were just bought their way into the priesthood, and then the Pharisees. Now, you see about the Pharisees and their teachings and so forth and all this kind of stuff. And then, of course, the Christians like to say, well, Jesus would probably associate himself more with the Pharisaic teachings than any other of the groups. Well, yeah, Jesus does, okay? But not Yeshua. Yeshua was completely separated. He denounced all of them and said, you're a bunch of hypocrites, right? You teach the laws and hang on to the traditions of men. You're not teaching the laws of Yahweh. You do away with the laws of Yahweh. Yeshua was very bold when he spoke and when he taught. So he said in verse 25, and he will speak great words against Yahweh. What do you hear today? You mention the name Yahweh in public and you will see the hatred that this man, this organization has put in the minds of people to hate the name Yahweh. And remember, the Pope is the one who's responsible for this, okay? And that's what he's talking about here. The house of Yahweh is even worse because the house of Yahweh, they hate just mention the name of Yahweh and that's it, And they can't stand it. And then if you try and ask them why, they can't answer you. They can't answer you why do you hate the house of Yahweh? You don't even know me. What have I done against you? Nothing. They can't answer it because their minds are just completely dumbfounded, because that's the confusion that's in there, is that they can't rationalize anything, that's why they can't make the proper decisions. They can't make a righteous decision because they don't know what righteousness is, and they don't have the ability to do it. Even if you point it out to them and say, look, this is the law you're breaking, now stop breaking this law, and they'll turn right around and they'll continue to do it in front of your face. Because they don't have the mind of understanding. Okay? And that's what you can't take for granted. You've got to remember how blessed you are to be able to know Yahweh and to be a part of his work in these last days. Okay? And be in his house. Don't forget that. Verse 58 here. Okay, well, he says, you see an inspiration there, okay? An inspiration of Satan leading these people. They've got their minds in a rut. And Yeshua said in Yachanai 8:44, he said, your teacher is Satan the devil, and what she tells you to do, you're going to do it. Plain and simple. They're going to do what Satan wants them to do because Satan is the teacher. She is the one who they're following. So they can't make that righteous decision. You can tell them, you're not supposed to be eating this pork because here's what the law of Yahweh says. Oh, really? Let me see that. Be eating on a ham sandwich right in front of your face. Reading the Bible. They just can't comprehend it. They don't have the understanding, okay? Because they follow Satan, and Satan has their minds blinded and confused. He said, now that's a fact, and you're a fool if you don't believe that right now, okay? And that's why he said you've got to believe all that the prophets have spoken, okay? Because prophecy reveals Yahweh. And if you believe all that the prophets have spoken, you're not going to be deceived. Okay? It's when you back off and you start questioning or start slacking off and forget what the prophets speak of, that's when you mess up. Okay? That's when you mess up. Remember, the house of Yahweh is, first of all, it's the, which is an article pointing out directly. Okay? It is the, there's only one. The house of who? Yahweh. Okay? That means Yahweh's in complete control. Okay? So you can't be questioning this or questioning that. If you don't understand something, you ask the question and find out about it. But don't doubt. Remember what Pastor said a few weeks ago? If you doubt, don't let Satan know you're doubting. Okay? Try and study and find out to get rid of that doubt. But don't let Satan know, or she'll take you right out of the house. And he will speak great words against Yahweh and will wear out, mentally attack, and cause to fall away the saints of Yahweh. And that's what we see taking place today. Mentally attacking. She's constantly just getting in there and just digging and grinding and trying to take out what's in our minds. Okay? And get us to thinking about, and notice what she does. To think to change the times, Yahweh's feast days, and laws. Now we already know, okay, that she's taken the pagan holidays and taking the thought of don't keep Passover and tabernacles and the laws of Yahweh. No, keep Christmas and Easter and all these days, right? That's what people always think about and stuff. But notice what he says here. Mentally attacking to wear out the saints and to think to change Yahweh's times, feasts, and laws. Where? She can't change Yahweh's law. Yahweh's law is forever. She can do whatever she thinks she wants to do and is allowed to do, but you can't change Yahweh's laws. However, you can mentally attack someone in their mind and make the person change their belief according to Yahweh's law, right? And keep them from keeping these laws holy unto Yahweh. So when you begin to keep the feast days and the Sabbaths in the way that you think is right, rather than what you're taught through the house of Yahweh, which is the only way to keep it, because it's Yahweh's way, it's Yahweh's house teaching you, then you begin to get mentally worn down. And Satan can attack you and put deception in your mind and pull you out of his house. So he says, history said this, and who changed this? They will be given into his hand. Do you see that prophecy? They're given to him to do this, okay? It was given a certain amount of time for the Catholic Church to work and to work on people and to do things so that this could be accomplished. Now, but this is prophecy, and that's the way that Yahweh works with prophecy. He already knows the end. He already knows what he desires and what he wants to accomplish. But he sets it up. And he brings you way back to the beginning, and he leads mankind along for thousands of years. He's just gone and bring things apart. It passes little by little by little by little, until eventually at the end it's going to bring the whole thing to completion and stuff. Remember, he could do this overnight if he wanted, but he hasn't. He's given mankind 6,000 years to prove a point, for a reason there. So he says, the book of Yahweh was given to them for almost 1,500 years. It was hidden, in Rome. And then he goes on and he talks about verse 61. Some of the people became converted. Tyndale was one of them. Wycliffe was one of them. He says, I think Wycliffe was one that the Pope actually dug up his bones and burned them and then scattered them. And he did. That was in 1428 AY that he did that. That was 43 years after this man was died. Pope Martin V was the one who dug him up and ground up his bones and burned his bones and scattered them out and so forth. That Pope was also the one who was responsible for making sure that the Jews had to wear a certain sign on them, because slavery was very big, and he wanted to make sure that it was okay for a Jew to go ahead and become a slave, but not one of these Christians and so forth. So it's the same thing that Hitler did when Hitler made the Jews wear the patches and stuff to distinguish who they were. All this came from the Vatican to begin with. It was just another repeat of what history had taken place. In verse 66, he says, all this is going on since the Catholic Church, by huge numbers, they sent people here, the Catholics, to the United States. Before it became the United States, they sent their people there to take over to establish schools, and these schools were still established, and they're teaching what the popes say. And right now they're teaching sodomy in every school in America. That there may be some that are refusing to teach it, But still, the opposition it might be there, but still it ain't going to stop it. They're going to continue on to do what they want to do, Nothing's going to stop it when it comes to that. Let's see, and then he says in the verse, then he says, he's given to his hand to a times, and dividing of time. In verse 26, this is verse 68. But the judgment will sit, and it will take away his government, consume, and to destroy it completely. Okay? Judgment. Remember, Yahweh says, here it is. Now, you make the choice, on what you want to do with it. But the judgment will sit. Okay? So true justice will sit at this time, will judge. And they will take away his government, consume, and destroy it completely. Every bit of government that fights against Yahweh in opposition of Yahweh is going to be destroyed. It's going to be brought down. He said, well, we're hacking away at this right now, that government that has established, the government of war, of force and fighting and hatred, the continual war. We right now in this race is to bring forth righteousness. Yes, we're destroying that mountain, that big mountain that sits before us, and it will become like a pebble, Malachi said. Like a little pebble, a little grain of salt that you walk on. He says, that's what we've been prophesied to do, you and I. You believe that? Praise Yahweh. Now, remember that race, okay? And back in verse 30, he says, I need you to understand this race before this feast is over. He says, because we're opposing Babylon. That's the race. And we're prophesied to win the race, okay? The world has been given a certain amount of time, okay? And that's that race, is to endure unto the end. That's the race that we're in. We've just got to endure to the end to show Yahweh that what we desire to do is to make it into his kingdom. And then verse 27, then the kingdoms and the governments and the greatness, that means an increase in dignity, okay? An increase in dignity of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of Yahweh, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, which it'll never be destroyed. It's everlasting. This is what Yahweh wants to give unto us. He wants to increase us in dignity and bring this whole plan that he has started from the very beginning. When he knew mankind was going to fall, he knew mankind would fail, he knew mankind would fall into sin, that mankind would go the way of Satan. All of this was in part of his plan to bring it together so that in the end, the last days, that we, the people of Yahweh, could understand all of these things all put together. That's why when the righteous are resurrected, we're going to have to teach them and bring all this to their understanding, because they don't comprehend it. They only knew bits and pieces of certain things, but they didn't have the whole plan of Yahweh with them. He said, well, this was on account of, in Daniel it says, keep this in mind, he says, because I've laid the foundation here for you. We're running a race. We're running a race with those who are bringing forth evil, war, sickness, disease, fighting, and hatred. Because of the increase of iniquity, the love of the many will grow cold. And Yeshua said in Matthew 24:12 that there would be many false prophets throughout the whole earth. And these false prophets are the ones who are bringing forth this iniquity of pushing away the laws of Yahweh. And Revelation 12:9 says the whole world is deceived at this time, and the earth is going to destroy itself. Isaiah 24:1-6. Because of this, the earth will be burnt, and few men will be left. Because remember, that word devour also means to burn up. Okay, it's the teachings of this beastly system that is bringing us all this to the point to where it's going to bring forth this great destruction. Like it says, the quartet is left. What's left of the quartet is wanting to enlarge, to destroy the earth. What's left of them is actually going to turn to Yahweh, the scriptures show. And those kingdoms are going to be given to us pretty soon. And then we'll be part of the kingdom of Yahweh. And they will be with us as well. May Yahweh bless you, man. We can go ahead and stop.